When I lowered my head to blow out the birthday candles, Ethan and Vivian kissed each other. This photo wasn't found until I was 50, tucked away in Ethan's wallet. I had been reborn, staring at the birthday candles before me, silently making a wish. In this life, I would no longer have any connection with Ethan. Later, Ethan hurried from afar, his eyes slightly red as he asked me, "Don't you want me anymore?" 1. I opened my eyes, the candles had already been extinguished, and the red light on the camera across from me blinked, capturing the photo. "This is the cake Vivian personally picked for you, she said you would definitely like it." Ethan's youthful face bore a smile as he handed me the cake knife. Standing beside him, Vivian's lipstick was slightly faded. Just moments ago, my best friend and fiancé had kissed each other in the few seconds I had lowered my head to make a wish. This photo had been secretly kept by Ethan for 32 years, with the words written on the back, "You are the regret of time." Only then did I realize that the person Ethan had never been able to let go of was actually Vivian, my best friend. Every time Vivian called from the US to vent her frustrations, Ethan would always find an excuse to go on a business trip there. Not even my illness could stop him from leaving. Coming back to my senses, on the table was a fruit cake covered with pineapples on the surface. But I was allergic to pineapples. The one who really loved pineapples was Vivian. Looking at Ethan and Vivian, who were so happy in front of me, my heart suddenly ached as if it had stopped. Remembering everything from the past, I couldn't help but throw the knife in my hand. The knife plunged into the cake, pineapples and cream rolled onto the floor. The cake was a mess. Ethan quickly shielded Vivian behind him, frowning at me. "Renee, what are you doing?" I looked at Vivian. "Last time you took me to the hospital because I was allergic to pineapples. Have you forgotten?" In my past life, I thought Vivian had just forgotten, never realizing she did it on purpose, wanting to see how I would react. Ethan was stunned, looking at Vivian in confusion. Vivian's eyes reddened. She said with grievance, "Ethan and I went to buy the cake together. I forgot you're allergic to pineapples. Originally wanted to give you a surprise. I'm really sorry, Renee. I'll go buy you a new one now." After saying that, Vivian wiped her tears and ran out. "Vivian." Ethan turned around, picked up his coat, and as he walked to the door, he gave me a cold glance. 2. They left one after the other. I walked to the camera, closed my eyes, and the scene from earlier flashed in my mind. That moment made me very uncomfortable. I patted my chest, feeling the healthy heartbeat. Although sad, I also felt somewhat relieved. My father and Ethan's father were comrades in arms. The first time Ethan and I met, we felt very close, and we made a lifelong promise. 3 years ago, my father passed away, entrusting me to the Ethan family. Ethan and I officially got engaged, planning to marry when I turned 20. And Vivian was my good friend since childhood, beautiful and tall, dreaming of going to America. I never thought that my best friend and fiancé would love each other so deeply. I had toiled for this relationship for half my life, only to find out how foolish I was until I died. Fortunately, fate allowed me to be reborn. I only hope that in this life, I can stay away from these two people. 3. Ethan didn't return until the next day. He didn't explain where he had gone last night, and as soon as he spoke, he asked me to apologize to Vivian. "Last night, she walked more than 10 kilometers to buy a cake. Renee, you can't be so willful." I sneered. "I didn't ask her to buy the cake. She went because she had a guilty conscience." "By the way, did you manage to buy the cake?" When he came back, he was empty-handed. For my 18th birthday, what they gave me was nothing but betrayal in my heart. Ethan fell silent for a moment, looking at me with disappointment in his eyes. "It seems I've spoiled you too much. I'll stay at the dormitory for a couple of days. You should reflect on your behavior." After saying that, he took 2 shirts and pants and left. I smiled, paying him no mind. I looked at the college application form on the table. There were only 3 days left to fill it out. Ethan was a lecturer at a local vocational college. Although my grades weren't good enough for top universities, I could still choose a decent school. In my past life, to be with Ethan, I chose the vocational college where he worked and picked a mediocre liberal arts major. After graduation, I found a clerical job at a nearby hospital, spending my life revolving around Ethan. Ironically, Ethan's love wasn't for me. When I went downstairs, I saw Aunt washing vegetables in the yard, and she suddenly pulled me into her kitchen. "Did you have a fight with Ethan?" I lowered my head without speaking. Aunt whispered, "Renee, Ethan is a good man. There are so many people out there who like him. You need to keep an eye on Vivian. She's the restless type, dressing so flamboyantly. You should be careful of her." I had heard these words before, but last time I would have explained. Now I was just a fool, still believing I was living a happy life. "I understand, Auntie, I'll be careful." I left the compound and went to the photo studio. I reached for the freshly developed photos, but Vivian snatched them first. She glanced at the photos and said casually, "So one roll of film is missing. You took it." I asked angrily, don't you have anything to say to me? She replied unhurriedly, you saw it, what else can I say? But don't worry, besides that kiss that night, we didn't do anything, at most he just takes special care of me. I took a deep breath, Vivian, why did you do this? She laughed, your father was just my father's driver, if it weren't for my father's accident would I be friends with you? We were never on the same level, Renee, now that you know, just turn a blind eye. Only then did I realize, from the very beginning, she never took me seriously. As she spoke, she fiddled with the camera. Don't worry, I'll go to America sooner or later, I won't ruin your marriage with Ethan, the position of Mrs. Ethan will always be yours. I found it somewhat amusing, aren't you afraid I'll confront Ethan and expose your affair? She said lightly, who can help you now besides Ethan? If you confront him, you'll be the one who ends up abandoned. As she spoke, she pulled me towards the street. She turned back to look at me, smiling, I'll let you see who he will choose. I struggled desperately, she was like a madwoman. Just then, a cyclist sped by and Vivian suddenly fell down. Ethan rushed over, pushed me aside, and caught Vivian before she hit the ground. She clung tightly to Ethan, it's not Renee's fault, it's my bad, misunderstanding us. Apart from the broken camera in her hand, she was completely unharmed. I fell to my knees, the pain intense, feeling as if my heart had been struck hard. Ethan looked at me coldly, Renee, you've really disappointed me. 5. Ethan took Vivian to the hospital. Watching the two of them, I felt utterly exhausted. The desire to leave them grew stronger and stronger. I sat in the park for a long time, and by the time I returned home, it was already dark. I decided to move out earlier. Before my father passed away, he left me some money. Although it wasn't much, it was enough to cover my living expenses and tuition for the next few years. For the next 2 months, I planned to start a small business to support myself until graduation. When I went to look for the money under the box, I found only 500 yuan left in my wallet. Thinking the house had been burglarized, I hurried out to report it to the police, only to run into Ethan returning home. I told him I was going to report it and he frowned. No need to go to the police station, I took the money. Vivian's camera was broken, and it was a gift from her boyfriend. I bought her a new one so she wouldn't have trouble explaining it when she goes to America. Ethan had been working for less than a year, and his usual expenses were already high. Afraid he might need the money urgently, I had left the 500 yuan in a place we both knew about. Without asking about what happened during the day, he had directly taken the money to buy Vivian a new camera. I stared at him and let out a light laugh, you're so good to Vivian, even better than to your fiancé. He felt somewhat uncomfortable under my gaze and said defensively, you're the one who pushed Vivian, so don't feel wronged. We've lived together for the past 3 years, and I haven't treated you badly. From now on, you can come to me directly for tuition and living expenses. By the way, are you hurt? I bought some medicine from the hospital. Before he could finish, I turned around and went back to my room, not wanting to hear any more. I sat on the bed, clutching the 500 yuan tightly in my hand. Tomorrow was the day to submit my college application. Early in the morning, Ethan wanted to accompany me. No need, I'll go by myself, I refused him. I didn't want to complicate the matter of changing my application. But he insisted on accompanying me. He pushed his bicycle into the yard and gestured for me to sit on the back. I didn't move and he sighed, Renee, I promised your father I would take care of you, and I won't break that promise. I know I've neglected your feelings these past few days and I'm sorry. But Vivian and I really have nothing going on, you have to believe me. Yes, he knew Vivian's pride, he knew they had no future, and I was just his compromise. He took me to school, and the teacher began distributing the application forms. Ethan sat beside me, choose the major I told you about. I know the teachers there, and they'll take care of you. After graduation, I'll help you find a job, so you don't have to worry about anything. His voice was gentle, and with his silver-framed glasses, he looked very refined. In the past, I loved this side of him the most, as if with him by my side, I had nothing to fear. I let out a light laugh and was about to fill out the application when suddenly a girl rushed into the classroom and walked up to Ethan. Mr. Ethan, Vivian sprained her ankle in the dance room and can't stand up now. It's really painful, you should go check on her. Where is she? Ethan immediately stood up. In the dance classroom up front. She's sweating from the pain and needs to go to the hospital. Ethan turned around and took a few steps, then glanced back at me, Renee, fill out your application first, then come find us. I'll go check on Vivian. I didn't say anything, just looked at him. Our eyes met and his gaze flickered slightly. At this point, what else could I expect? Go ahead, I curled my lips into a faint smile, I can handle the application myself. He nodded and left the classroom. I watched his retreating figure, then lowered my head and filled in the name and code for Shenzhen University. Shenzhen University in Nan City, thousands of kilometers away from here. In this lifetime, I would stay far away from them. 7. When I handed the application form to Teacher Wang, she gave me a relieved smile. It's good that you've come to your senses. Today, I was planning to talk to you about it. Actually, Ethan's school isn't bad, but with your grades, you could easily go to a better school. There's no need to hesitate here. In my past life, the teacher had also advised me, but I didn't listen. This time, I decided not to let her down. I asked Teacher Wang not to tell Ethan about the change in my application. Then, instead of going to find Ethan and Vivian, I went straight home. On my way home, I was thinking about my future tuition and living expenses. The camera Ethan bought for Vivian had almost drained all my savings, and the remaining money was barely enough to cover my travel expenses. As I passed by a commercial street, I noticed some street vendors and suddenly had an idea. I decided to start a small business. When Ethan returned home, I didn't even notice him. It wasn't until he walked up to me and handed me a box of cake that I looked up. It was my favorite strawberry cake, with the strawberries arranged in the shape of a heart. So he did know what I liked, even if he usually didn't pay much attention. I'm sorry, I wasn't thoughtful enough on your birthday. This is my way of making it up to you. Make a new wish and I'll light the candles for you. As he spoke, he took out the candles and inserted them one by one into the cake. Renee, there have been some misunderstandings between us recently and I want to apologize. Today, I was just taking Vivian to the hospital. If you don't like me spending time with her, I want to meet her alone in the future. He sounded sincere, but I couldn't help wondering what expression he would have if he saw the photo of him and Vivian kissing that I held in my hand. The candlelight flickered, but I didn't close my eyes or make a wish. As the candles were about to burn out, I softly said, you know, there's only one 18th birthday in life. Once it's gone, it's gone. Ethan was stunned and his eyes dimmed as the candles went out. The bond between us, like the candles, had burned to its end. There were still 2 months before school started and I needed to find a way to earn some money. This time, I decided to take advantage of information gaps and start a small business, buying and reselling popular goods in the provincial city. The process was tough, but fortunately, I had matured a lot and managed to overcome the difficulties. In less than half a month, I had earned back my initial investment. By the second month, I was making even more, enough to cover 2 years of tuition and living expenses. Ethan had tried to dissuade me, but seeing my determination, he didn't say much more. For the remaining half month, I bought more goods, preparing for a big sale. That day, the weather was nice, and I set up my stall near the cinema. Just as I finished arranging the items, the movie ended, and a crowd quickly gathered around my stall. Ethan, look, does this hairband suit me? I heard a familiar voice and turned to see Vivian, wearing a red dress, standing next to Ethan, smiling happily. They looked like a young couple. Ethan glanced at me and froze. A month ago, he had promised not to meet Vivian alone. Why are you setting up a stall here today? Ethan asked. I smiled faintly. Wherever there's business, I'll set up. Are you here to watch a movie? Ethan looked a bit guilty and was about to explain when suddenly someone nearby shouted, the city inspectors are coming. I reacted quickly, stuffing the goods into my bag and preparing to run. Ethan helped me pack up. Within 3 minutes, everything was packed, but the inspectors were getting closer. I slung the bag over my shoulder and was about to run when Ethan took one of the bags, saying, let me help you. He turned to Vivian, you go home first. Vivian nodded, though her eyes showed some displeasure. But I didn't have time to care about her. I grabbed my bag and ran. Suddenly, Vivian fell, clutching her ankle in pain. Ethan, I got bumped and my old injury flared up. It hurts so much. Ethan put down my bag and went to check on her. I watched them coldly, not wanting to see their act anymore. I picked up the bag he had dropped and quickly ran into the alley. A middle-aged man gave me a thumbs up. You're quick, kid. You've got some skills. I smiled but didn't dare to stop. I had to keep running, no matter how much it hurt. I had to escape this place that had trapped me for so long. 9. When Ethan returned home, I was already asleep. The next morning, I woke up to find breakfast prepared by him on the dining table, along with a note. The note explained that he hadn't planned to watch the movie with Vivian. They had just coincidentally run into each other after the show. I let out a cold laugh and threw the note into the trash. For the next few days, I left early and returned late, barely seeing Ethan. I didn't want to see him, nor did I want to hear his explanations. Time flew by and there were only 2 days left before school started. I had almost finished packing my luggage and sold the last item I had. Letting out a long sigh of relief, I looked at my bulging wallet, feeling both reassured and free. On my way home, I passed by a clothing store and caught a glimpse of my exhausted reflection in the glass window. Since I was going to report to school tomorrow, I thought I should buy some decent clothes. I walked into the store and tried on a beige dress. The clerk's compliments made me happy, and I paid the deposit on the spot. Just then, I heard a familiar voice. It was Vivian and Ethan. "This dress is so beautiful. It would look perfect for waltzing." "I heard waltzing is really popular in America," Vivian said. "If you like it, buy it," Ethan replied. When he saw me, he was momentarily stunned. "Renee." Vivian also noticed me, a flash of jealousy in her eyes. I smiled and responded, "Sorry, but this dress is already mine. You can look at other styles." Vivian showed a hint of reluctance, her tone tinged with grievance. "If Renee likes it, that's fine. You'll need some nice clothes for university, after all." Seeing Vivian's pitiful expression, Ethan seemed to feel sorry for her. He hesitated for a moment, then turned to me. "Can you let Vivian have it? She's a dance student and she can't dress too shabbily when she goes to America. You're going to university to study and you're getting married soon. Why do you need such a pretty dress? I'll give you 100 yuan and you can buy some shirts and pants instead." I shook my head. "I like this dress. Renee, can't you be more reasonable? Vivian is going to America soon. Are you really going to fight over a dress with her?" Ethan said. "I'll let her have it, but only if she pays 10 times the market price for it," I replied coldly. Ethan frowned, clearly not expecting me to set such a high price. Vivian pretended not to care, but her eyes were fixed on the dress. Ethan couldn't bear to see her upset, and quickly took out money from his wallet to hand to me. I took the money without hesitation and walked into the fitting room to take off the dress. In the end, the dress, along with me, was handed over to Vivian. I had just arrived home when Ethan returned. "Tomorrow is your first day of school, and Vivian and I wanted to pick you up and celebrate tonight. But you got angry with her over a dress, and she said you must have heard something to be so upset. She went back crying. Renee, you've always been sensible. How did you become like this? I told you before, the rumors outside are not to be believed. Why won't you listen?" Ethan stormed in, seemingly thinking that a strong demeanor could mask his inner guilt. I found his act amusing. I sneered, "Since you think so little of me, let's call off the engagement." He was clearly shocked by my words, pausing before laughing in disbelief. "Fine, I thought you'd come to your senses after a few days of cooling off, but instead, you've gotten worse. Renee, you've really disappointed me." Ethan slammed the door as he left. I sat there, looking around. If he had taken one more glance, he would have noticed that none of my personal belongings were left in the room. I laughed at myself and pulled out my luggage. All my possessions were a wash basin, a quilt, a few books, and some clothes. As I went downstairs, Auntie Lee saw me dragging my bags and quickly asked where I was going. "I'm going to school, it's a bit far, but don't worry, I'll come back to visit when I have time." Auntie Lee sighed and asked me to send her regards to Ethan and Vivian. "Good child, take good care of yourself out there." I hugged Auntie Lee and disappeared into the night. As I left, a photo quietly fell out of my clothes. After I left, Auntie Lee picked up the photo and saw it was Ethan and Vivian kissing in front of a cake. The train rocked all night. When I arrived at my destination, I took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling as if I had been reborn. After settling in, my life became much more fulfilling. I enrolled in a major I loved, studied hard, and spent my spare time setting up a stall. Business got better and better, and I accumulated quite a few regular customers. During the winter break of my freshman year, everyone went home for the new year. I had no home to return to, so I stocked up on some New Year goods to make some money during the holiday. On the last day, it drizzled a bit and the weather was somewhat cold. I sat at my stall with a hot water bottle when Ethan suddenly appeared in front of me. He smiled slightly. "Renee, come home for the new year, the elders miss you." I glanced at him, feeling little emotion. Half a year had passed and he was still the same, wearing a gray suit and silver-rimmed glasses, looking gentle and refined, but with a bit more weariness in the corners of his eyes. I said coldly, "No need, we've already called off the engagement." He was anxious. "Give me a chance. I promise to stay away from Vivian, never see her again. If you're willing, I can transfer to the south and accompany you to school. Renee, let's go back to how we were, live our little life, okay?" I didn't answer, just silently looked at him. Ethan's tone softened. "If I say, besides that kiss in the photo, nothing else happened, would you believe me?" I sneered. "Wasn't that kiss enough? Whether I believe you or not doesn't matter anymore. Our relationship ended on my 18th birthday. Ethan, considering our father's friendship, let's part on good terms." After saying this, I turned away to attend to customers. Ethan stood in front of my stall for a long time, head down, and left a card when he left. "Don't work so hard, I'll deposit money for you every month, the password is your birthday." I looked at the card with a sarcastic smile. I never touched a single cent from that card. In the following years, he would occasionally come to Nan City to see me, but most of the time, he couldn't find me. I was either at my stall or studying in the library. Every time he came, he would leave some things with the dormitory auntie to pass to me, including local specialties and dresses of different styles. I shared the specialties with my classmates. Those dresses, I still kept them in the closet, never wearing a single one. In my senior year, Vivian came looking for me. After the kissing photo spread through Auntie Lee's words, the entire alley knew about it. Ethan's work was greatly affected. He was suspended for a year and almost fired due to misconduct. He didn't receive any commendations for several years, which also affected his promotion to associate professor. In the previous life, Ethan had sailed smoothly, becoming the youngest professor in the college by the age of 30. Meanwhile, the news of Vivian seducing someone else's fiancé reached her wealthy American boyfriend, leading to their breakup. Vivian's American dream was completely shattered. She found a job at a dance theater, but due to her improper lifestyle, she was ostracized by her colleagues. Vivian had been struggling and finally gave up, starting to pester Ethan. She cornered me at the library entrance, demanding that I persuade Ethan to give up his transfer to Nan City. I ignored her, but the next day she climbed onto the school rooftop, threatening to commit suicide to force me to convince Ethan to revoke his decision. She sat on the edge of the rooftop. "Renee, I really underestimated you. You ruined my chance to go to America, and now you're stringing Ethan along. You're really something." I asked coldly, "Vivian, what exactly do you want?" More and more people gathered to watch, and I was so angry that my face turned pale. She demanded that I call Ethan, have him cancel the transfer, admit that I was the third party, and then drop out of school. Otherwise, she would jump, saying I would be ruined too. I didn't expect her to make such unreasonable demands. I didn't care whether Ethan went to Nan City or not, but she actually wanted me to drop out. She was insane. I turned to leave when a man in a denim jacket walked out from behind a stone wall, holding a mobile phone. He waved the phone. "I've already called the reporters, they'll be here soon. Either jump now or wait for the reporters." I heard that reporter is from Beijing, maybe they can dig up some juicy news. You might even make national headlines. Vivian visibly flinched, looking around as if checking if the reporters had arrived. At that moment, the man grabbed her leg and pulled her down from the rooftop. A few hours later, Ethan arrived. When Vivian found me, I immediately called Ethan. By the time we left the police station, it was already late at night. Ethan chased after me and said sorry. I sneered. I thought we could still maintain some decency, but apparently not. "Ethan, I just hope you and Vivian never appear in front of me again." Ethan was stunned, his face pale, lips trembling, and he said nothing. I turned and left, still in a bad mood. The incident of Vivian's rooftop threat caused a huge uproar. Although the school provided an explanation, some people still pointed fingers at me. The school gave me a disciplinary record, but it didn't affect my graduation. As graduation approached, Auntie Lee called to ask if I had found a job. During the conversation, she mentioned Ethan and Vivian, who had returned from Nan City and gotten married. I smiled slightly, feeling unusually calm inside. It was good we were no longer each other's regrets. In 2014, after graduating from university, I chose to start my own business and opened a trading company specializing in overseas trade. With experience from my previous life, I identified trends and seized opportunities. Within 3 years, my small team of a few people expanded to over 100 employees, and simultaneously, Alex Corporation, the largest real estate developer in the southern city, announced their investment in my company. At the celebration banquet, I met the mysterious heir to the Alex Group, Alexander. He wore a high-end custom dark suit with his shirt slightly open, revealing a small section of his sturdy neck, which added a casual touch. Combined with his handsome face, his presence commanded attention from the moment he entered. He approached me, gently swirling the wine glass in his hand, and smiled, "Long time no see." I was stunned, not remembering where I had met him before. He smiled and pointed to the ceiling, Shenzhen University, rooftop. He was that curly-haired guy in jeans from the rooftop. He smiled and said to me, "I've had a crush on you for a long time, senior. Will you give me a chance?" A year later, I married Alexander. I never thought I would marry Alexander the First, hadn't even thought I would enter into marriage again in this life. When he proposed, he told me, "Life is a process of trial and error. You can't reject everything just because you failed once. It's like doing business. If one client doesn't work out, you try another. Since you're going to try again, why not try with me? What if I'm the right one? Looking at his sincere and handsome face, I thought it would be hard for anyone not to be moved. In 2015, after marriage, Alexander and I focused on our respective careers. At 28, my trading company became a 100 million level enterprise and successfully went public. In the same year, I became pregnant. The delivery process wasn't smooth. Alexander waited outside my door for 2 days and 2 nights. When the nurse opened the door, before she could speak, he hurriedly shouted, "Save my wife! Save my wife! Doctor, you must save my wife!" The nurse looked at him, as if he were crazy. The mother gave birth to a girl, 6 pounds and 9 ounces. The baby is being fed inside. Please sign here first. Alexander was stunned for a moment, then burst into tears. Ran, no more children, we won't have any more children. The billionaire CEO cried like a drowned dog outside the delivery room. In the delivery room, hearing his cries, I couldn't help but smile. In my 30th year, I took Alexander and our daughter back to the northern city. After paying respects to relatives, I brought gifts to visit Teacher Wang and several aunties who had been kind to me. Standing in the courtyard, I found the upstairs door locked. Aunt Lee told me the couple upstairs might be at the hospital or police station. They probably won't be back for 2 or 3 days. I asked her what happened. She said that couple hasn't been able to conceive after many years of marriage. Yesterday, when Vivian happily brought back her pregnancy test results, Teacher Ethan slapped her as soon as he came home. I had never seen Teacher Ethan so angry. His eyes were red. Fortunately, we held him back, or Vivian might have been beaten more severely. Later, both an ambulance and police car came. So Vivian was pregnant. I almost laughed out loud. She still didn't know that Ethan couldn't have children. I used to want a child badly but couldn't conceive after 5 or 6 years of marriage and felt very anxious. I underwent many medical examinations but no cause was found for over a year. It wasn't until Ethan turned 30 and had a physical examination that they discovered he was the one with the problem. Over these years, I endured much criticism from the Ethan family, who blamed me for being unable to bear children. Ethan never spoke up for me. Perhaps in his heart, as long as Vivian wasn't hurt, he didn't care. When the truth finally came out, Ethan only said, "Sorry for the hardship you endured." He was a university professor who needed to maintain his image. For the next 20 years, I continued to be denounced as the infertile woman. Yet Ethan was praised by everyone for staying loyal to me despite my condition. Now Ethan was 34, knowing he couldn't have children. I couldn't understand why he didn't tell Vivian the truth. Vivian wasn't a content person. She liked to compete with others and sought excitement. She probably didn't really love Ethan. She only wanted him because he was my husband. She enjoyed manipulating others' feelings and the thrill of affairs. She could betray me, her childhood friend, and she could betray Ethan too. At 50 years old, I was healthy, had a good marriage, and my daughter was well behaved and capable. I was invited back to my hometown as a corporate representative to give a speech to university students. I said, "I'm very grateful for the early difficulties in my life. Without challenges, there would be no opportunities for success. I hope when you face setbacks, you'll stay strong and move forward bravely." The students were inspired by my story and applauded enthusiastically. As several school leaders were seeing me off, we encountered Ethan at the school gate. He was 54 then, looking much older than before. After one scandal after another with Vivian, the school felt he had damaged their image and transferred him from teaching to the logistics department, where he spent his life watching over the library. I was well dressed with good bearing, and though there were some wrinkles on my face, I still felt fortunate. He said to me, "Long time no see." I nodded, smiled, and turned to get into my car. Lee Auntie's daughter drove me to the airport. Like her mother, she loved gossiping. Along the way, she told me about all the major events that had happened in the past 20 years. Vivian and Ethan still hadn't divorced. Vivian eventually gave birth to that child. Initially, she claimed the baby belonged to a wealthy young man from America. However, when a paternity test was arranged in America, it revealed that the child wasn't the wealthy man's. Feeling deceived, the wealthy man sent people to beat up both Vivian and Ethan. Vivian's leg was broken, leaving her with a limp, and she could never dance again. Later, through unknown means, Vivian somehow convinced Ethan to accept this child of uncertain parentage. Vivian behaved herself for a few years, but her nature hadn't changed. Eventually, she began an affair with someone else, even with her limp. Surprisingly, it was Aunt Lee who caught them in the act. She said they were entangled in bed. Even after this, Vivian refused to divorce Ethan, sticking to him like glue. Their child grew up to be troublesome. At 18, he attempted a robbery for internet cafe money and seriously injured someone with a knife. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Ethan, as the guardian, had to sell their house to compensate the victim. As for Vivian, she had long since disappeared without a trace. Over these 30 years, Ethan, who should have been a respected university professor, had become the subject of people's jokes. After hearing all this, I wasn't sure how to feel. I could only say that karma had come full circle.